This is Healthcare Now Radio's Talking the Walk. Come along with us as host Tom Testa and his guests discuss the strides being made toward actionable changes in the industry. It's a fast-paced 30 minutes, so keep up. And now, here's Tom Testa.
Welcome to Talking the Walk on Healthcare Now Radio, where we explore the people, ideas, and innovations shaping the future of healthcare. I'm your host, Tom Testa, and today I'm joined by Dr. Kathryn Shaffer. She's a nurse, educator, innovation leader, and consultant with more than 30 years in nursing and over 2 decades in higher education. Kathryn serves as Director of Innovation and Associate Professor at Thomas Jefferson University College of Nursing, and is also the co-founder and COO of Fifth Window, a platform dedicated to nurse well-being. Kathryn is also one of our winners of the Healthcare Now Radio Nurses to the Mic competition. Kathryn, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Tom.
Thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited about this conversation. This is a topic we have not touched upon, so I'm really anxious to dive into this with you. Let's get right to it, Kathryn.
Okay.
You spent more than 3 decades as a nurse, as I talked about there, and nearly 2 decades educating future nurses, which is awesome.
Right.
What experiences led you to become so passionate about transformational belonging?
So that's kind of interesting because I teach both spectrums of nursing education in the undergraduate level. I have the great opportunity to meet them when they first enter the university in an intro to nursing course. So there are pre-nursing majors. And then I see them all the way at the end when they are seniors in my nursing innovation class. And several years ago, I inherited the Intro to Nursing course, and I was, like any good faculty member, teaching about the history of nursing. And when I looked out into my room full of students, it did not resemble the students that were sitting in front of me. And so I thought, you know what? I need to change this course a little bit. So I redesigned their final assignment, which was to go find a nurse in history or current day nurse and find out about them. See how you relate to them. Do they have a similar background? Do they have the same cultural background? And I want you to present that to other students in the class. And the first semester, it went like typical first time when you pilot something. It was good. It wasn't great. And the second semester was probably the first time in 18 years of teaching that I was actually brought to tears. Because when I was reading their reflections, I read several students who made very similar comments, such as, I never saw, for example, Asian Americans represented in nursing before. I never knew people like me were in history of nursing. I always had one vision of nursing. And that immediately changed the way I thought of how I was going to do everything for the rest of my life as a faculty member. I wanted students to see themselves in this profession as they're sitting in my seats. Those students who said they never really saw themselves in nursing, they applied to school. They got in. They were sitting in my class and still they couldn't envision themselves as a nurse in nursing. And I was like, this is not a confidence problem. This is a representation problem. And this is something that I've been spending the last several years of really trying to help students see that where they belong. And that, if a student can't see themselves in nursing, then it's hard for them to see themselves as a nurse, even as much education as we give them. So that's kind of how I became so passionate about having people realize that they belong here and that there is room for every single one of them here.
Wow, that's so powerful. And a perspective I would have never, I would think, here I am, I'm in your course. I belong, right? And yet still you saw that they needed to see that they truly did belong. They were in the right place and they still are in the right place.
Yes.
Wow. I think a little bit about that. There's also when dealing with the nursing profession, and I'm not speaking from an expert, just that's you, of course, but you always hear about nurses needing more than resilience. Resilience is huge. Why do you believe resilience has become an insufficient answer to the challenges facing the profession today? You dealt with the belonging, which was great. Here they are. Now, beyond resilience, what is it? What are those challenges facing these nurses?
Well, so I like to say that, resilience used to be a virtue, right?
Mhm.
But somewhere along the way, since COVID, we turned that into a coping mechanism for a broken system. And we keep teaching, nurses to survive in conditions that we should be fixing as a healthcare system. We tell nurses to bounce back when the system is already engineered to keep them, knocking them down. And when resilience becomes the only answer to every problem, the quiet message that is really the problem is that it's your problem. It's all has to do with your capacity, and it's not a design issue. And so somehow we blame nurses for like breaking under the weight that they were never meant to carry alone. And I think that's the problem that I have become, again, really focusing on that to stop using the word resilient,
Mhm.
and start really looking for reclaiming joy. Joy will ultimately help define your resiliency. But for me to keep teaching you to be resilient is just me keep telling you that it's your problem and it's just a system and you have to figure out how to manage the system.
That's interesting too, because we've seen a lot about, there's still a lot of investment in resilience training, wellness programs, self-care initiatives, all that stuff. But it sounds like those efforts are falling short. Where do you see that happening?
Well, so you can't like I hate to say this, but you can't yoga or do a guided meditation out of an understaffed unit. Like you could do all the unit yoga you want, but if a unit is still understaffed, it's understaffed. And listen, I hate this has become a very cliche kind of thing to say, but a pizza party doesn't fix a 1-to-8 ratio on a unit.
Hmm.
And most of these problems treat symptoms in the individual, why again, leaving that actual cause untouched in the system. And there are downstream fixes for these upstream problems. They hand the burden of recovery again back to the nurse and the
Mhm.
burden of like, change to no one. So real well-being in my mind is designed into the workflow, not bolted on after the harm has already occurred.
Hmm. Now, I certainly don't want to have you name names, but what are some examples of systems or structures that unintentionally make nursing harder? So, then supporting nurses' ability to thrive. We talk about the pizza parties aren't working, right? We need we need more than that to support them. So, what are examples of systems that are trying to, but they're intentionally hurting rather than helping?
So I would say that the systems that are unintentionally still making it harder for nurses
Yeah.
is that we have engineered exhaustion. Nobody intended that, honestly. And
Mhm.
we built a profession on documentation and then act surprised when nurses feel like they're so overwhelmed with data with every click, right? Click after click, added in the name of safety, quietly displacing nurses and the human encounter that we have, staffing grids that assume nobody ever calls out and orientations that rushes new grads before they're even ready or competent and never feel confident into practice. So we have engineered exhaustion without a single person intending it to be. And I think that's the biggest issue.
I think we're going to talk a little bit about the innovations that are helping with that in a little bit,
Mhm.
but in the meantime, you know, how is all that you're saying too, and it's a big issue, it happens on the nursing side, the any kind of provider side, but how is the patient care being impacted when the workload is just overwhelming for these nurses, or they're thrown kind of sort of right into the fire without getting some of the training and the expertise they need ahead of time to be resilient? How's that impacting patient care?
So I'm going to say that I think it really has to do with nurses not feeling seen. And
Okay.
that whole like psychological safety component to feeling, and this can even go back to transformational belonging. When
Yeah.
you create space for transformational belonging, people show up as their authentic selves. And when I do this intentionally in my classroom, students don't just learn nursing, they learn how to be a nurse because I provide them space to be wrong. I provide them space to question and
Mhm.
say, I don't understand it. Just tell me again, right? But I think what we've done in healthcare is that we have created this invisible nurse almost.
Mm.
And, an invisible nurse is a quiet nurse, and a quiet nurse is a safety risk because they won't speak up. But a nurse who feels like valued, they'll escalate the subtle changes that they might see in a patient. The nurse who feels invisible assumes no one is listening and stays silent. And that silence is actually where errors live, right? So when I talk about transformational belonging, it's not a soft benefit. I think it's a patient safety strategy when you think about it.
Absolutely. No, that's critical. I want to ask you one more thing on this, on kind of this topic that we're talking about here, on being seen and well-being. If a health system CEO asked you tomorrow, what's
Mm.
the first thing I should change to improve nurse well-being? What would you tell them?
This is a great question. I would have to say stop launching initiatives
Okay.
and
Hmm.
start closing loops, right? Pick one thing nurses have been telling you for years and fix it. And then name them as the reason why you fixed it. Like most well-being programs are designed for nurses, but not with the nurse actually in the room saying this is great, this isn't great, right? So I think the fastest way to rebuild trust isn't a new program when it comes to these initiatives or what should you do first. I think that the proof that nurses' input actually changed an outcome means so much more to nurses than ever before. I think about these last several months and all of these major nursing strikes, right? In hospitals,
Mhm.
hospital nurses going on strike. And it is not nurses being defiant. It is, it's like finally when someone screams and you hear them, I think nursing has gotten to the point, finally gotten to the point they said, our method of screaming right now is that we strike. And
Mhm.
so why not before a nurse screams, we listen to them and fix some of the things that are causing those problems for them to be truly invested at the bedside with patients, and you might see a different outcome. You might see that nurses won't leave the bedside as quickly as they do now.
Hmm. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Talking the Walk on Healthcare Now Radio. I'm Tom Testa, and joining me today is Dr. Kathryn Shaffer. Kathryn, I want to get back to a little bit about the students, your students, the ones that you see every day, the ones that you've helped feel seen, right, and heard and belong. Um, what are today's nursing students telling you they want from the profession that may be different from previous generations?
I see a lot of it through different lenses. I have four adult children myself, young adults. So I see a lot of it through them who kind of guide me in helping me shape my students. And I would say that I think that this generation isn't asking for an easier job.
Hmm.
They're asking us to be honest with them and have an honest job, right? They're not interested in being martyrs anymore as a job description. They watched the pandemic. Many of them lived going to school online during the pandemic. They've seen maybe their family members who were nurses during the pandemic. Um, and previous generations were taught to earn their place by enduring. And these students walk in and ask why enduring is the entry price. And that's something that I think about a lot. They want their judgment to matter more and their humanity to survive this work that we're asking them to enter into.
That's in fact, my follow-up here on this is, so how can how can they better prepare? How can nursing schools like the one, how can they better prepare students for, to meet students where what they want and how they want it? How can they do that?
So we are very good at producing nurses who can pass a test and pass nursing school, but we are not yet good at producing nurses who can last. And clinical competence is a table stakes, is what I think. And what we underteach is really discernment, ambiguity, productive struggle, advocacy, and truly professional identity, in my opinion. The things that let a nurse stay whole across, like, listen, I've been a nurse for 30 years. It was my second career, but I've been here for 30 years. And if we only train for the first shift and not the long career, in my opinion, we're building a workforce that's designed to leave. So we need to go back and rethink that piece in our nursing education.
Well, I want to shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about maybe some of the technology that you're passionate about that might help some of that too with the future, this generation of students and nursing students and what they're getting into as they get in the profession. You've spoken about AI discernment rather than simply AI adoption. That's great. I love that. What do you mean by that distinction? Tell us.
Yeah, so AI literacy teaches you how to use the tool. And I think that should be the floor, right? But discernment teaches you to know when not to use AI. That should be the ceiling. So if you think about it this way, adoption asks, can we use this? But discernment asks, should we here for this patient right now? And we are rushing to make nurses AI literate, but fluency isn't wisdom, right? So that has to be really thoughtful in doing it. And I've been saying this now for a couple of weeks to colleagues and on LinkedIn and anywhere I can get a conversation going that the algorithm is not the nurse. It doesn't know the patient. The nurse does. And that's where I think that we really have to be mindful about AI discernment versus just adopting every tool that they throw at us.
And do you feel that's more of a workflow support kind of thing versus cl on the clinical side when it comes to AI? How do you see that?
Yeah, I think that's more of a workflow because I think what we want to do with it is we think that AI is going to solve that burden problem at the bedside, charting and all of these different tasks, and AI will take it away. But in the end, the nurse is still responsible for patient care. So if we aren't mindful of what tools we are building, how we are using these tools, and where exactly does nursing's judgment stay intact, we are going to have, I believe, major patient safety issues. And the ultimate person responsible will be the one carrying out the algorithm, which
Mhm.
is most likely going to be the nurse.
And there's certainly the caution there as we try and build trust, AI still, right? Trust in this, and as we do in anything when it comes to the medical profession. But so there's that side of things. But what have you seen that does actually excite you about the possibilities with AI when it relates to the nursing, of course, profession?
Yeah, so it's the same. I'm going to say it's what excites me is what we think it can do, right? That
Mhm.
it could finally maybe give nurses back the one thing that we have been silently stealing away from all of them, which is time at the bedside or time with people, because it's not just in acute care settings, right? It's in ambulatory care settings, it's in the community, but it's just giving nurses time back to be human again and to spend some time with nurses. I'm genuinely hopeful that some of these ambient tools that are out there that listen and that chart, that can do it so that nurses can look at patients instead of the screen all the time. And if done right, AI doesn't replace nursing judgment. It just clears like a runway for it in my eyes.
Are you seeing a lot more of these scribes? I mean, is how and I don't mean to. I hope I am asking this right, but how is it being taught in by you that, hey, here's how, like these, like that's just something I'm thinking about. Like I know they don't just show up one day and go, hey, well, you probably use chat at home, so now you can use it here. Like how are the ambient describes being taught by you?
So that's a very interesting question because right now, I am working on within my university an AI literacy and governance initiative where we are really being mindful of looking at things like the ANA AI position statement, the NLN position statement, AACN, the ABN AI's 8 competencies for nurses and AI, and being mindful of, there are some places that it should not be used. There are places, creative spaces. You run with it however you want. And then there are spaces, here are the guardrails. But I think the first thing to do is we need to be mindful of how, when we are teaching, at least my students, to really think about what is the AI that we're looking at? Is it predictive models? Is it generative models? Is it, analytic data models? So what was the intent of this piece of AI? And who was involved when it was created? What kind of biases exist? What are the risks of using it? If you trusted the output totally without discernment, what would happen? And ultimately, who's responsible? So we're using that kind of, very sketchy flow of how we're designing our initiative here in the College of Nursing. And, the promise really isn't like a smarter machine, but it's to design or to have the nurse realize to be more present at the bedside.
That's great, and I think and it's an important take for even the healthcare consumer to understand. Like that's great. Like I know they don't think anything's, hopefully think things are willy-nilly, but this is what's actually happening behind the scenes. This is how the current and future workforce is being trained, the nurses. Like I think that's critical because AI can be a big scary world for a lot of folks, and as we look to build trust with it.
Yeah, and I think that innovation without accountability is not innovation. It's a risk transfer, if you really think about it. And we are installing AI into healthcare faster than we are asking who is accountable to do what is it accountable to do, right? And I think it arrives as a solution before anyone ever defined the problem, which is all about design thinking, right? A lot of nurses in innovation and entrepreneurship know about design thinking. We talk about design thinking, that who's the end user? What are you designing and using it for, right? So some of these AI tools that are coming out, which make it risky, is that there is no nurse in the design room at all. And so every tool really carries this embedded assumption and real limits, but no one is taking ownership of the recommendations, and the nurse inherits both the risk and the blame. And so if the nurses are not in the rooms where these tools are built, then they will be in rooms when it fails too, and that's not going to be a good place for nursing.
Wow. I have a couple more questions. This has been such an amazing conversation. Thank you, Kathryn. I can't thank you enough for being here today. We're not done yet. I've got a couple
Okay.
questions for you. Um, I want to kind of look outward looking a little bit, or if you're a healthcare leader listening right now, we've got a lot of them as part of our audience. What's one thing every healthcare leader should understand about nurses that they may be overlooking today?
Okay. So I think the one thing that they are looking at, you know, nurses aren't your largest expense, that they are your most underused source of intelligence. And I think leaders in healthcare still see nurses as a labor cost on a balance sheet. And nurses know exactly where the systems are failing, and often it's like 6 months to even more before the metric actually catches up. So the leaders who treat nurses as real-time sensing networks, almost like a living dashboard, right? Look, every healthcare system wants to see the dashboard, like what's my metrics on a dashboard. Instead of staffing that line item, they will out innovate everyone else by using those nurses to that capacity.
Wow, that's outstanding. I hope every healthcare professional, especially at the leadership level, takes that to heart. That's a great take. What's Now let's turn to the nursing. Maybe your
Mhm.
students who are listening or who will listen, and any other nurses out there, what's the one thing you'd like every nurse listening to hear right now?
So, what I'd like everyone to hear right now is that if you're tired, it's not because you're weak. It's because you've been carrying this structural problem alone. The system was built wrong. You were not built wrong. Your best is good enough. And your exhaustion is not a character flaw. Your voice is not optional, though, at this time. Nurses deserve a seat at the table. And if you are allowed to help build that table, do so.
Wow. Kathryn, thank you so much. Thank you for joining me today. The work you're doing with this generation and future generations of nurses. Thank you so much. So it's such an important profession. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today on Talking the Walk. Tune in to hear us weekdays at 8:30 a.m., 4:30 p.m., and 12:30 a.m. Eastern Time. You can also find all our episodes on the Talking the Walk program page on healthcarenowradio.com. If you're welcome to talk, we want to talk to you. Connect with me on LinkedIn or by filling out the show's contact form on healthcarenowradio.com. Until next time, I'm Tom Testa. Take care, everyone.